everybody, it's Emily Dark Schooling, and today I'm going to be bringing you one of my favorite videos to film. These are my top 10 books of 2019. Every year I sit and think out like what books have made the biggest impact on me that particular year. And so I'm very excited. These are in absolutely no particular order. I tried to come up with which one is my all-time favorite. Maybe by the end of the video, I will have like which one is my favorite of the year. So I want to start with my two honorable mentions. I tried to streamline it. I didn't want to have like 8 million books to talk about. But of the 110 books I read this year, we're going to talk about my top 10 favorites and then the two that are my honorable mentions. So the first honorable mention I want to talk about is All Different Kinds of Free by Jessica McCann. This book was such an emotional roller coaster ride. It made me so frustrated, so sad. It was also hopeful in a way, and I loved every second of reading it. It was very powerful. This is a story about a woman, it's a true story based on a Supreme Court case about a woman who was born free. She was African American. She was born free. Her parents had been freed by their owners, but the woman who owned her parents came back as when she's an adult and decided to retroactively re-enslave her so she could sell her because she needed the money. And so she took the case to court because she was free, but they didn't have the paperwork to prove it. So the story is very, very upsetting, but also it has some hope towards the end, and it was just so beautifully written. And I love stories like this that are based on little known historical events, and in this case a Supreme Court case. It was very, very frustrating to read, but also an important story, I think. And the other book that I want to give an honorable mention to is A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahereh Mafi. I loved this, and I really had a hard time not putting it in my top 10, so I really wanted to talk about it. But this book was just beautiful. This is technically historical fiction because it takes place right after 9/11, and it's about a girl who is Muslim, and she's in high school, and she's dealing with the aftermath of 9/11 and how people treat her now because of that. And it's very good, very, very well written, and very moving. I immediately, upon finishing this, I basically threw the book at Sarah and was like, you must read this. You have to. It's about a romance between her and this white boy. I think it's not about her and her husband, but it's kind of loosely based on that, and it's just such a good story. Okay, so now let's get into the top 10. These are the books in my top 10 of 2019, in no particular order. First up, I have Someone Knows My Name by Lawrence Hill. This, as well as the two honorable mention books I talked about before, were all from Build Your Library Level 12. Not all, but several of the books in my top 10 are, because that's what I spent most of the year reading. But this book was so beautiful. This is a story about a woman from, I think, the age of 12 at the beginning of the story through her entire life, as when she was young in Africa, from being taken and thrown into slavery, and her experiences being a slave and then working towards freedom. It's just such an important, moving book. I loved this. This story is epic. It like I said, it covers her entire life from the age of 12 until she's in her 80s. And it's just such a moving story about what she went through and her experiences as a slave, and it's just such a beautifully written story, and I think everyone should read it. And even though it's a big book, I think it's like 500 pages, maybe 400 pages. Yeah, it's like 480 pages, but it reads really quickly. Next up, I want to talk about The Golem and the Jinni by Helene Wecker. This book was so good. I had been wanting to read it for ages, and I needed something that was like somewhere in the turn of the century New York, and I wanted to find a book like that. And so of course I'm like, oh wait, this gives me an excuse to read this book finally. And so I picked up The Golem and the Jinni as a potential for level 12, and I freaking loved it so much. I want to read this book again, like once a year. It's just so good. This is a story about people immigrating to New York city and to coming to America, and you're following the perspectives of Chava, who is a golem. She was created by this man who, using Jewish mysticism magic from the Kabbalah to create a golem. And then you're also following a jinn from Syria, I think, and how their lives intertwine. And it's just so well done, so beautiful. The way the characters all come together and are all connected in different ways. It's just such a beautiful story. And I keep hearing that there's a rumor that there's a sequel in the works. I don't know when we'll ever get that, but I look forward to the possibility of it, because this book is just so stinking beautiful that I want to like throw it at everybody. Everyone should read it. It's beautiful. Another book on my list is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This is another book that I had been meaning to read for ages, and I finally picked it up. And of course, it was great. I was a little bit nervous going in because of how hyped this book is. I worried that it had been overhyped for me and that I would be disappointed somehow because of that, because that's happened to me in the past with other books, but this book lived up to the hype. It was so good. This is a story about a girl who sees her best friend get murdered by a police officer and dealing with that and standing up for him when he is portrayed as a thug by the media, and being there to be his voice when he can't be. And it's so well done and so important and so timely. And this is one of those books that even if you think it's been overhyped, you should read it anyway, because it's worth the hype. Next up is The Indifferent Stars Above, the harrowing saga of the Donner Party by Daniel James Brown. This is nonfiction. I have been obsessed with it all year. I was so excited to pick this up because I've been intrigued by the Donner Party my whole life, because it's such a weird little episode in history, but that you often don't hear too much more than that there was cannibalism. And I wanted to know more about like what happened to these people. So I picked this up. I ended up putting it in level 12 because it was just so fascinating. My twins are reading it right now. They're about halfway through. We took a break for the holidays, but I just think this book is fantastic. It's very well written, very interesting. I found this book to be just utterly captivating. I could not stop reading, and I'm very excited to read more things that take place with the Donner Party. This book is just so good. I need to look for other things that he has written, because I see that he has other books that I'm sure are just as well written as this one. Another nonfiction is Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. This book was so moving, and I'm so excited that there's a movie based on it. I'm hoping it gets more people to pick this book up and to think about things like this. This is a story about a lawyer who makes it his goal to get people off death row who are put there wrongly. And it follows a case about a black man who was wrongly arrested and accused of murder, and there was no evidence pointing that he did it, but he was black, and they decided that it would be easiest to just take him and put him in prison and claim that he was the one that committed the murder, because they needed to peg someone. And so the lawyer in the story, Brian Stevenson, it's a nonfiction, he made it his mission to get this man off death row and save his life. And it shows not just how that happens, but also like what being on death row and being accused of something you didn't do, what that does to your life, and how it affects not just you, but the people around you. And it's just so moving and so important, and such an important read. And so, yeah, my twins are reading this too. So, also in level 12. Okay, the rest of the books I have here are not things that I read for Build Your Library. These are just books that I read for me. I'm so excited to talk about this next one, Lovely War by Julie Berry. This book was just everything. I loved every second of reading it. This is a story about World War I, but the narration is done by the Greek gods. And I found this because I told Sarah that I wanted to read something like Hadestown. I've been obsessed with Hadestown for like the last 6 months, and I wanted something like that in book form. So Sarah said, what about Lovely War? She had just heard about it. So I bought it, read it immediately, and I'm obsessed with it. So this story follows two couples. You're following Hazel and James and Aubrey and Colette, and their lives and romance during World War I, and it's just gorgeous. This book is so underhyped right now. I'm like screaming about it to everybody. Like, everyone needs to read this. I don't know why this isn't more popular. Maybe it's because it's historical fiction. I don't know. But this book is amazing. The way it is narrated by the Greek gods is just so well done. And I love a book like that, that has really interesting narration. I love a quirky book, and this does it so well. And it's beautiful. I really want to read it again, so I can have all the feelings and emotions once more. Another historical fiction, Fatal Throne, The Wives of Henry VIII Tell All. I read this at the beginning of December. That's why you wait until the end of December to film videos like this. You don't know what book you might pick up at the end of the year that is a favorite. This book is one that I had been talking about reading for ages, and I finally picked it up, and I'm so glad that I did. This is phenomenal. This is a book about the wives of Henry VIII, and it's told from their perspective. And in between each of their chapters, you get a Henry chapter where it's him reflecting on his experiences with that particular wife, or moving on to the next one. And it's so good. This is a great starting place. If you want to read about the Tudors, but you don't know where to begin, start here. The way that and it's written by a variety of young adult authors, and the way each author takes on their wife, their role, and gives them their voice is so well done. I especially love the Anne Boleyn chapter and the Catherine Howard chapter, but also the Anna of Cleves, and I did not expect that. Anne of Cleves is usually one of the ones that I just sort of like blow over, because she's the least interesting in my mind, because she's barely a blip. She's only married to him for like a few days, or I think it's a couple of weeks, before they get an amicable divorce, and then they're like best friends, basically. And I just, the way it was written in this book was just so good, and now I want to read more about her, because she's so often overlooked by me, I guess. But also, you know why? Because Jennifer Donnelly wrote Anna of Cleves, and I freaking love Jennifer Donnelly's writing. She's just so good. I need to read more of her things. So, but yeah, the Anne Boleyn chapter was just spectacular. The way they had her written, reflecting on her life as she's waiting to be beheaded, and just perfection. The Catherine Howard chapter was so good. I've always felt just like this horrid sadness for her. The way that things happened to her was so unfair. And I just, the way it was written in this was so good. This book is so excellent. Next, I want to talk about The Walking Dead. I finished it. I have read the entirety of The Walking Dead at this point, and there have been volumes where I was just like, meh, that was kind of boring, whatever. But this book was so good, and I'm also, this is a reflection on the story as a whole, but the way this ends, I've been thinking about it like for weeks, and I still I'm thinking about it right now, and I'll probably be thinking about it for years. But if you have been watching this show and you want to know the real story, I recommend picking up the comics, because where the show gets things wrong a lot, the comics do it so much better, and the storyline flows better in the comics. I appreciate that Robert Kirkman doesn't draw this out longer just to make more money. He knew he needed to have an end, and I also love that he ended it without telling anybody. Like, there was no announcement, it just ends. Nobody knew when they bought this volume that that was the end, that was the last comic. So it was great, the way it was just unexpected. But the way it ends is done in such a beautiful way that I'm sitting here going, this was beautiful, but they'll never be able to do it on the show in a way that makes sense. And that makes me so frustrated. I really wish that the show could have like ended 3 seasons ago and ended like this, because they just, it's not gonna work, and it'll frustrate me to no end. But you know, the comics are beautiful. They're really well done. They're really interesting look at what the world looks like in an apocalypse and how people handle that. Next up, a book no one's going to be surprised is on here, is The Toll. I love this book so much. I love this series so much. It's so well done. I can't even. I want everybody to read this, because it's just such an interesting story. And And I think it has mass appeal. I know it's young adult, but it doesn't read like young adult. Like, it doesn't feel like it's written for teens. It feels like it's written for everyone. And it's just such an interesting look at our society, and society that could be, like, everything that happens in here, it feels realistic. Like, there's nothing in here that's like, well, that's just crazy science fiction. No, this feels like it could really happen. Like, this could be our future. I believe it. And I'm excited for the Thunderhead to take over our world and give me my nanites so that I can, like, not be in pain all the time, so that I can eat all the things. But yeah, I just think this series is wonderful. I'm still reading it with my twins. We didn't finish it before the live show like I wanted to, but you know, that's fine. I don't mind reading it because it's such a good series and such a great end to the series. The last book I want to talk about is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I read this back at the beginning of the year with my twins, and we did this as a read aloud, and it was so much fun and such an interesting story. And I really loved the social commentary again on, like, how we deal with fame and how we think of, like, social media and how it works in our society, and how we get addicted to the fame and the numbers and thinking about things like that. And I just thought this was such an interesting portrayal of that, but also with an interesting, like, sci-fi twist. I'm so excited for the new book. That's probably my most anticipated book of 2020, is whatever the heck it's called, A Beautifully Strange Endeavor. Possibly something like that. In my mind, it's always going to be an absolutely remarkable thing. That's what we call it. But yeah, I'm very, very excited to read that because I want to know what happens next. This book is just so great, though. I highly recommend picking it up. Hank Green is a really great writer. He has a really interesting perspective on things, and I want everyone to pick this up. So now that I've gone through my list and talked about all the books, I think my tie for favorite book of the year is between Lovely War and The Toll. These are both books that, like, I have just been so excited about, and so just, like, pumped to tell people to read. These are books that I think will make more of a lasting impact on me, that I'll be thinking about for years to come. And yeah, these are books that are just the best of my reading in 2019. So what were your favorite books of the year? What was the book that you think made the most impact on you as a reader? What book did you tell people about the most, that you just want everyone to read? Let me know in the comments and we can chat. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye.